When a racist cop punches the wrong black judge, what happens next will shock you. Stay with me, because every second of this story is packed with action, suspense, and a powerful message you'll never forget. But before we dive in, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? I love seeing how far our stories travel, and if you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a story that will leave you thinking long after it ends. Alright, let's get into it. The courthouse steps were always busy on weekday mornings. Lawyers hustled with briefcases. Defendants lingered nervously, and families crowded in waiting for their cases to be called. On this particular Tuesday, the air was buzzing with more energy than usual. Everyone was whispering about a new face presiding over high-profile cases in the city. Judge Malcolm Harris, a sharp, no-nonsense black man in his late 40s, known for his fair rulings and refusal to bow to political pressure. Malcolm was tall, with a dignified presence that commanded respect without effort. He had worked his way from a childhood of poverty to become one of the most respected judges in the state. Every step he took was deliberate, every word measured. He didn't dress in flashy suits or wear gold watches. His authority came from the way he carried himself. Today he was scheduled to hear a case involving police misconduct, and the irony of what was about to unfold could not have been scripted by Hollywood itself. Across town, Officer Brent Callahan was already seething with anger. A white cop in his late 30s, Brent had been on the force for more than a decade, notorious for his short temper and abrasive style. He was the type who believed his badge placed him above accountability, and he loathed the recent push for reforms and oversight. To him it was soft politics. He particularly despised Judge Harris, though he had never met him personally. Why? Because Harris had been critical of police corruption, and had handed down rulings that exposed misconduct. Brent saw him as a threat. By noon, tensions boiled over. Judge Harris had just finished lunch at a quiet diner near the courthouse. He walked out calmly, his black overcoat flowing behind him, his briefcase swinging at his side. The street was bustling, cars honking, pedestrians weaving through crosswalks. But as he rounded the corner toward the courthouse, he noticed a commotion near the bus stop. A young black teenager, barely 16, was being shoved against a brick wall by none other than Officer Callahan. The boy's backpack was on the ground, its contents scattered, while Callahan barked at him. "What are you hiding, huh? You think you can walk through this neighborhood like you own it?" His voice was loud, drawing the attention of passers-by. Judge Harris slowed, his eyes narrowing. He could see fear plastered across the boy's face. "I didn't do anything, sir," the boy stammered, his hands trembling as he tried to show his empty pockets. "Shut your mouth," Callahan barked, pressing harder into the boy's chest with his forearm. "I know your type." The crowd grew uneasy, murmuring among themselves, but no one dared step forward. The presence of a badge intimidated them into silence. Harris, however, stepped closer, his deep voice slicing through the air. "That's enough, officer." Brent whipped his head around, his eyes narrowing at the tall figure in the long coat. "And who the hell are you?" Harris stepped forward with calm authority, showing no fear. "Release the boy. You have no grounds to detain him." "Mind your business," Brent snapped, his hand twitching near his holster. The crowd gasped, sensing danger. Harris reached into his pocket, not for a weapon but for his wallet. He flipped it open and revealed his identification. The sunlight glinted off the seal of the state judiciary. "Judge Malcolm Harris, and this is my business. You're violating this young man's rights." For a split second, Brent froze. He hadn't expected this stranger to be the Judge Harris. His jaw tightened, and the vein in his neck pulsed with rage. His ego couldn't handle being called out publicly, especially not by a black man. The whispers in the crowd grew louder. Phones were lifted, cameras recording every second. "Judge Harris, huh?" Brent sneered, masking his shock with contempt. "I don't care if you're the president. Out here, I'm in charge." "You're out of line," Harris said firmly, his tone cutting through the noise. "Let the boy go, or face the consequences." The teenager looked between them, hope flickering in his eyes. But Brent's pride was already wounded, and anger overtook reason. He shoved the boy to the ground, then stepped toward Harris with clenched fists. "You think you're better than me, Judge?" Brent snarled, his voice shaking with fury. "You think your robe makes you untouchable?" Harris didn't flinch. "Control yourself, officer. This is not how a man of the law behaves." That was the final spark. In front of dozens of witnesses, with cameras rolling, Brent's rage erupted. With a swift, violent motion, he swung his fist and landed a brutal punch across Judge Harris's jaw. The sound of flesh against flesh cracked through the air. Harris stumbled back, blood at the corner of his lip, but he did not fall. The crowd screamed in disbelief. "He hit the judge," someone shouted. Others gasped, their phones capturing every angle. The boy scrambled away, disappearing into the throng, while Brent stood over Harris, his chest heaving, his eyes wild. Harris straightened slowly, his dignity unbroken despite the sting of the blow. He wiped the blood from his lip, then fixed Brent with a look that could cut stone. "You've just destroyed your career," he said calmly. But Brent wasn't finished. He lunged forward, trying to grab Harris by the collar, but this time Derek, yes, the same Derek from the earlier courthouse protest, stepped in. He had been walking nearby and saw everything unfold. A former Marine turned community activist. Derek grabbed Brent's wrist mid-swing and twisted it behind his back with practiced precision. Brent roared in pain, but Derek didn't let go. "You've lost it, cop," Derek growled, pushing him to his knees. "You just assaulted a sitting judge in broad daylight, and guess what? The whole world saw it." The crowd erupted, chanting Harris's name, some yelling for Brent's arrest. Police sirens blared in the distance, growing louder as more officers rushed to the scene. Judge Harris adjusted his coat, standing tall once again despite the bruise forming on his jaw. He looked down at Brent, restrained and humiliated on the sidewalk. "This isn't about me," he said, his voice carrying authority that silenced the street. "This is about accountability, and you, Officer Callahan, are about to learn what that means." The crowd cheered, their phones capturing every word. The city had just witnessed a moment that would ignite headlines, protests, and court battles for weeks to come. And deep in Brent's gut, for the first time in his arrogant career, fear began to creep in. Because karma had just opened the door. The courthouse plaza was in chaos. The punch, the judge's bleeding lip, the crowd's shocked gasps. Everything was captured on dozens of cell phones. Within minutes, live streams were spreading across social media. Hashtags appeared instantly. Justice for Harris, punching the judge, and accountability now. But in the middle of the uproar, Officer Brent Callahan was still thrashing against Derek's grip like a trapped animal. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck as he barked, "Let me go. I'll have your badge for this. You don't lay hands on an officer." Derek twisted harder, keeping Brent pinned on his knees. "Badge? After what you just did, you won't have one by sundown." The crowd cheered. Some shouted, "Lock him up." Others yelled, "We saw it all. No excuses." The chants grew louder, echoing against the marble walls of the courthouse. Judge Harris, steady despite the swelling bruise on his face, raised a hand. "Quiet. Let the law take its course." His deep, commanding voice carried authority even in the middle of the storm. The crowd's noise dimmed, but their anger still simmered. Squad cars pulled up, sirens cutting abruptly as officers spilled out. For a split second, it wasn't clear how they would respond. Would they protect one of their own, or enforce the law fairly? The lead officer, a stocky man with a buzz cut, rushed forward. "Brent, what the hell happened?" Brent, still straining under Derek's grip, spat out, "This thug assaulted me while I was doing my job, and this so-called judge interfered in police business." Gasps erupted from the crowd. Phones zoomed in. Live comments exploding online. "He's lying. We all saw the video. Judge Harris didn't touch him." Judge Harris stepped forward, his coat still immaculate despite the bruise on his lip. He spoke calmly, his voice cutting through Brent's lies like a blade. "Your officer brutally punched me in public. These people recorded it. You can review the evidence yourself." The lead officer hesitated, his eyes darting between Harris, Derek, and Brent. The weight of the crowd's stares pressed on him. Cameras were everywhere. Every move he made would be judged by millions online. Finally, he motioned to Derek. "Let him up, sir. We'll handle it from here." Derek shoved Brent forward with controlled precision, releasing him only when two officers grabbed him by the arms. Brent thrashed, shouting insults. "You're all dead. You hear me? Dead. He's not a real judge. He's just another whip." His words were cut short as one officer clamped a hand over his mouth. "Enough, Brent," the lead officer growled. The crowd booed, their fury boiling over. "Fire him. Arrest him." Harris raised both hands to calm them, though his jaw tightened with restrained anger. He turned to the lead officer. "He assaulted a judge in the course of duty. You know the penalty for that. Will you do your job, or shall I issue a contempt order right here?" The plaza fell silent. Everyone leaned in, waiting. The lead officer swallowed hard. He knew there was no way to protect Brent now. Not with the videos, not with the judge himself standing here bleeding. Slowly, reluctantly, he nodded. "Officer Brent Callahan, you're under arrest for assault." The crowd erupted in cheers. People pumped fists in the air. Others chanted, "Justice, justice." Brent's face twisted with disbelief. "You can't arrest me. I'm a cop. This is all set up." But his voice was drowned out by the roar of the crowd. Handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. The image of a white cop being handcuffed after punching a black judge sent shockwaves online. In less than an hour, News vans swarmed the courthouse steps. Anchors were reporting live, microphones shoved at anyone willing to give a statement. You saw it? Was the judge provoked? Is this the end of Callahan's career? Derek stayed close to Judge Harris, acting almost like a silent bodyguard. You all right, Judge? He asked quietly. I'll live, Harris replied, dabbing the blood on his lip with a handkerchief. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot. By evening, the incident dominated national headlines. Every major outlet ran the footage. Some praised Judge Harris for his composure. Others debated the deeper issues of police power and racism. Comment sections exploded with outrage. Protesters gathered outside the precinct where Brent was being held, demanding he be charged to the fullest extent of the law. Inside a dimly lit interrogation room, Brent sat cuffed to a table, sweating bullets. His arrogance was gone, replaced with nervous twitches. Across from him sat internal affairs officers, their tape recorders running. Officer Callahan, one of them said flatly, "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Brent sneered weakly. "I did my job. That kid was suspicious. The judge interfered." The IA officer leaned back, folding his arms. "The entire country saw you punch a judge in broad daylight. Do you know how much trouble you're in? You'll be lucky if you don't serve prison time." Brent's stomach sank, but he tried to mask his fear. "The union will protect me. They always do." The officer exchanged a knowing glance with his partner. "Not this time. You embarrassed the entire force. Politicians are calling. The mayor is furious. You're toxic now." Meanwhile, Judge Harris sat in his chambers, ice pressed to his swollen jaw. His staff hovered anxiously, but he waved them away. He stared out the tall window at the courthouse steps below, where protesters were still chanting. He knew this was bigger than one officer's rage. It was about accountability, about systemic rot that had festered for too long. His phone buzzed. It was the governor. "Judge Harris," the voice said, "the state is watching closely. You'll have our full support in pressing charges. That man won't escape justice." But Harris knew karma had a way of working beyond courts and politics. What Brent had unleashed today was bigger than handcuffs or trials. It was the spark of a reckoning, and it was only just beginning. The city hadn't slept. Overnight, the video of Officer Brent Callahan punching Judge Harris had spread like wildfire. It wasn't just trending, it was dominating every screen. News pundits argued endlessly, activists organized, and angry citizens flooded social media with demands for justice. The courthouse plaza, once a symbol of authority, had transformed into the epicenter of a movement. By morning, hundreds of people crowded outside, waving placards. "No one is above the law," "Justice for Harris," and "End police corruption." Chants echoed against the concrete walls, a thunderous rhythm that shook the air. "Lock him up, lock him up." Inside the courthouse, Judge Harris stood before a mirror, adjusting his tie. His jaw was still swollen, a dark bruise running across his cheekbone. He didn't care about appearances, but he knew the cameras would focus on every detail. The world needed to see his strength, not his pain. He was determined to show resilience, not weakness. Derek entered the room without knocking. He had barely slept, but carried the same intensity in his eyes as the day before. "The streets are boiling, Judge," he said. "They want blood. The people aren't going to calm down unless they see real justice. Not talk, action." Harris nodded, his reflection staring back at him with steely determination. "That's what we'll give them. But it has to be by the law. We can't descend into chaos." "Law?" Derek scoffed. "The law hasn't protected us for decades. Look at Callahan. He thought he could get away with it, because the system always protects men like him. But this time is different. He hit the wrong man." Before Harris could respond, a clerk rushed in. "Your Honor, the arraignment for Officer Callahan is scheduled to begin in 30 minutes. Media access has been restricted, but—" She hesitated, glancing nervously between them. "There's enormous pressure for transparency. The press is threatening to camp out in the courtroom." Harris exhaled slowly. "Let them. The people deserve to see what justice looks like." The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Journalists filled every bench, cameras lined the back wall, and protesters' chants seeped in through the tall windows. The air was electric, buzzing with expectation. Brent Callahan was led in, his wrists cuffed, his uniform stripped. His once arrogant stride had been replaced by a nervous shuffle. His eyes darted around, but he avoided Judge Harris's gaze. He knew every camera was fixed on him, every whisper in the room directed at his downfall. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced, his voice booming. Judge Harris entered, his robe flowing behind him, and the entire room rose to their feet. The bruise on his face was a glaring reminder of what had happened, and silence fell as he took his seat on the bench. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Elaine Cortez, stood immediately. Your Honor, the state charges Officer Brent Callahan with aggravated assault, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming an officer of the law. We request he be remanded without bail due to risk of obstruction and flight. The defense attorney, red-faced and sweating, scrambled to respond. Your Honor, my client punched a sitting judge in public, in front of dozens of witnesses and cameras. Harris interrupted, his voice cold but even. Choose your words carefully, counsel. The room erupted in murmurs. Cameras flashed. The defense attorney stammered, his arguments collapsing before they even began. Brent finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Your Honor, I was provoked. You were not provoked, Harris cut him off sharply. His voice carried the weight of the gavel itself. You attacked a citizen without cause, then assaulted a judge when held accountable. Do you deny that? Brent's mouth opened, but no words came. He glanced at the cameras, then at the jury pool waiting in the gallery, then back at Harris. His arrogance was gone, replaced with the pale realization that the walls were closing in. Outside, the chants grew louder, spilling into the courtroom like a rising tide. Derek stood among the protesters, his voice leading the chorus. No bail, no bail. Inside, Harris leaned forward. Officer Callahan, this court is not here to debate your feelings. It is here to uphold justice, and justice will be served. He banged the gavel once. Bail denied. The room exploded with noise, applause, cheers, shouts of triumph. Reporters sprinted outside to broadcast the ruling. Protesters erupted into celebration, their chants shifting to justice served, justice served. Brent's face drained of color. The guards tightened their grip on his arms, preparing to lead him away. He muttered under his breath, just loud enough for Harris to hear, "You'll regret this." Harris's eyes locked onto him, unflinching. "The only thing I regret," he said softly, "is that it took this long for you to face consequences." But even as the courtroom vibrated with victory, Harris felt the chill of unease. He knew Brent's words weren't empty. The officer wasn't just a lone wolf. He had allies, a network inside the force who shared his twisted views, and they would not let this humiliation pass without retaliation. That evening, as Harris left the courthouse surrounded by supporters and press, a black SUV idled across the street. Inside sat 3 men, their badges glinting in the dim light. One of them lit a cigarette, exhaling smoke as he muttered, "They think they've won. They have no idea what's coming." The fight was far from over. Karma was only just beginning its work. Dawn broke over a restless plaza, wax on steps, chalk on stone, posters in hedges. Judge Malcolm Harris arrived early with 2 deputies and orange-vested court watch volunteers. Inside, his clerk set a sealed envelope on the desk. No return address. Block letters across the front. "Stay in your lane." Harris slid it with a brass opener. The message was built from newsprint, words glued into one sentence. "You humiliated the wrong man." A deputy produced an evidence bag. Harris slid the page inside. "Log it." Across town, Derek stood at a whiteboard in a neighborhood legal clinic. Volunteers packed the hall. Teachers, veterans, pastors, defenders, coders. At the top he'd written, "Timeline, witnesses, video, radio." He paired elders with students and set one rule. "No rumor," he said. "Receipts only." Under digital, he added, "Mirror every clip before takedowns." The teen from the bus stop came forward through a mentor. A civil rights archivist surfaced a long-lens video from the far end of the block, clean audio. Brent's voice flat. "I'm in charge out here." A second voice bled through a police radio across the street. "Copy Callahan, proceed." The timestamp matched the punch within seconds. By noon, Internal Affairs called Harris. Detective Alana Owens, crisp suit, careful eyes. "Your Honor, I'm running a parallel review. I need device inventories and corridor cams." Harris granted access. Full cooperation. 3 unmarked sedans began circling the clinic. Derek clocked plates and texted them to the tech channel. Minutes later came a reply. 2 plates from a city pool, 1 from a private firm run by a retired captain who trained Brent. The pattern on the board grew darker. At 2, Mrs. Patel, a janitor of 20 years, knocked on Chambers. She had found a mezzanine lock drilled and a drawer skewed. Transfer logs for disciplinary hearings out of order. Cameras showed a hooded figure dodging lenses and slipping through an electrical chase. He knew the angles, a deputy muttered. Evening brought a meeting. Harris, Assistant DA Elaine Cortez, and Derek gathered in a small conference room with a view of the alley. On the table lay the threat note, screenshots, plate lists, and radio printouts. Elaine tapped her pen. "We'll file intimidation of a judicial officer and tampering. Whoever drilled that lock misjudged how many cameras still work." Derek pointed at the sheet of plates. "And whoever hired the private firm left fingerprints." Owens paged Derek at dusk. Forensics had cloned Brent's department phone. Inside a deleted folder sat a group chat labeled The Wolf Yard, threads scrolled with clipped lines. Keep him quiet. Make the robe think twice. A photograph showed Harris crossing the plaza, circled in red. Under it, a single emoji, a fist. Metadata tied 2 usernames to serving officers and 1 to the retired captain's firm. Not locker room noise, Owen said. Coordination. Near midnight, Harris used the rear exit. Deputies swept shadows. Derek idled his pickup at the corner as an extra set of eyes. A black SUV eased from a loading bay and rolled toward the judge with lights dimmed. It nudged faster when the nearest deputy turned to answer his radio. Derek saw the angle, a rear quarter hit to spin a man into brick. He gunned the truck, swung across the lane, and pinned the SUV against stacked pallets. The driver bailed. Hood up, he sprinted through drizzle and vaulted a fence. Derek vaulted after him. The runner slid on moss, recovered and cut left through a breezeway toward a loading dock. Derek kept pace, ate the corner, reached and grazed nylon. The man shrugged free of a soft-shell jacket and vanished behind a rolling gate. Derek came up with the jacket and a cap printed with a private security logo. Owens arrived with 2 uniforms. She bagged the items and studied the fence line. He rehearsed that route, she said. We're past warnings. She turned to Harris. Consider an off-book detail until the arraignment cycle slows. Harris exhaled. I will not hide, he said, but I won't be foolish. He looked at Derek. My thanks. Derek nodded, breath still fire in his chest. Receipts, he said. Morning brought sirens and cameras. The Wolf Yard leak hit 3 outlets before breakfast. A podcast played audio of a supervisor sighing. Make it go away during a call the night of the punch. The mayor ordered an external audit. The union staged a shaky press conference. Protesters shifted from chants to voter tables in court support. The clinic sent witness prep guides citywide. Brent sat on a steel bench, eyes red from sleeplessness. His lawyer set a file down and spoke evenly. They found the chat. They found plates tied to friends. They found a jacket with a private badge sewn inside. They have the note. If there's more, now is the time. Brent stared at the scratched floor and finally whispered, I only wanted him scared. The lawyer didn't look up. He isn't. That evening, candles returned to the plaza. The teenager stepped to the mic and read a statement he'd written in pencil. His voice shook on the first line, then steadied. He named where he'd stood, what he'd heard, and whom he'd called. When he finished, he folded the page and handed it to Elaine, who sleeved it carefully. Harris spoke last. He didn't mention the alley, the jacket, or the chat. He spoke of work and law, and the thread of courage that runs through a city when neighbors choose one another. He ended with a promise as simple as a gavel strike. No one is above the rules we ask our children to follow. Sirens flared again as helicopters circled low above the district. Nearby tonight, across the street, a phone vibrated on a dashboard. A text glowed in the dark. Plan B. The city was no longer whispering. It was roaring. For days, demonstrations filled the downtown grid. Courthouse steps turned into a pulpit of chants and candles, neighborhoods into block parties of resistance. Yet under the noise, a second game played out. Encrypted texts, shadowed meetings, officers caught between loyalty and law. Judge Harris arrived each morning through the front entrance deliberately, a signal to the public. The bruise on his face was fading but visible, a purple badge of honor. Derek never left his side, blending with deputies and volunteers, eyes always scanning. He'd grown used to spotting patterns. The same sedan 2 blocks away, a man with earpiece lingering near a kiosk, camera shutters clicking too late. Inside chambers, Elaine Cortez laid folders in neat rows. Discovery requests are flooding. Defense is begging for delays. They're scared of what's coming out. Harris leaned forward. The Wolf Yard leaks? She nodded. 2 resignations. 1 suspension. But they'll try to burn evidence before trial. Owens from Internal Affairs slipped in carrying a gray laptop. She connected it to the courtroom projector. Recovered from Brent's personal drive. He thought deletion was enough. On screen bloomed spreadsheets, shift rosters, maps of protest routes, overlays of Harris's commute. At the bottom of one page, Plan B. The room chilled. What is Plan B? Harris asked. Owens tapped a key. A schematic unfolded. Entrances to the courthouse marked with arrows, H-face reefs noted, and a circle around the judge's parking bay. Not a metaphor, she said. A breach. Derek's fists tightened. They wanted him gone. Elaine's jaw locked. We need this unsealed in court. Show the jury how deep this went. That evening, as rain peppered the plaza, protesters held umbrellas like shields. Candles flickered, signs lifted high. Derek wove through the crowd, scanning rooftops. A rumble of engines pulled his gaze. 3 SUVs sliding from an alley, windows tinted. His gut clenched. Through the drizzle, one rear window lowered, a cylinder extended. Down, Derek roared, shoving people toward cover. A hiss sliced the air, canister trailing smoke arced toward the steps. It clattered, spun, spewing gas. Screams erupted, people scattered, coughing, eyes burning. Derek sprinted forward, grabbed the sizzling shell with his jacket, and hurled it back. It burst near the SUVs. Drivers panicked, swerving. One vehicle fishtailed, slammed a hydrant. Water geysered skyward. The others peeled away into the maze of streets. Phones captured everything, the attempted assault, the panicked retreat. Within minutes, streams flooded social platforms. Wolfyard's Plan B in action. Harris emerged from the courthouse flanked by deputies, coughing but unbowed. He raised his voice over the chaos. "Do not run. Do not fear. The truth is out." The crowd steadied, rallying around him. Candles relit, chants rose stronger. By dawn, federal agents had joined the probe. Brent, dragged from his cell, faced new charges: conspiracy, terrorism, attempted assassination. His swagger was gone, replaced by hollow eyes. In court, Elaine laid out evidence: the note, the chat logs, the alley chase, and now the gas attack. Screens showed freeze frames of Brent bragging in messages. "We'll make him cough before he talks." Witnesses stepped forward. Mrs. Patel with her janitor's keys, the teenager with his folded page, Derek with the jacket bearing the security logo. Each voice stitched a quilt of facts no defense could tear. The jury sat stone-faced as Elaine's closing rang. No badge, no title, no shield excuses violence. He struck a judge, then plotted worse. But justice is not blind tonight. It is clear-eyed, steady, and unflinching. Silence fell. The foreman rose. Guilty on all counts. The gavel cracked like thunder. Outside, the plaza erupted. Cheers, tears, embraces. Reporters shouted into mics, headlines spinning. Cop who punched judge convicted. Protest signs became victory banners. Drums echoed blocks away, turning outrage into celebration. Harris addressed the sea of faces. Rain streaked his robe, but his voice was strong. "This is not my victory. It belongs to every person who stood, who filmed, who testified, who refused silence. Today proves something simple. The law belongs to all of us, and no one, not even those sworn to uphold it, can rise above it." Derek stood behind him, exhausted but proud. The boy from the bus stop, safe now, sat on the steps holding his mother's hand. Owens crossed her arms, watching the plaza pulse with life, satisfied the rot had finally been dragged into the light. The sun broke through clouds, casting a beam across the courthouse columns. For once, the building looked less like a fortress and more like a promise. Karma had struck, unbelievable, undeniable, unforgettable.